Over 2,000 years ago, the Chinese civilization was driven to a turning point unprecedented in history by the Qin army. However, according to historian Sima Qian, this army destroyed every city it passed through, slaughtering the inhabitants. Could it be true that this terrible army unified the whole of China, relying solely on cruelty and brutality? In 1974, large quantities of weapons were discovered in the Terracotta warriors' pit. After studying these weapons, something very unusual came to sight. Something not written by Sima Qian. At Xiping County in Henan Province, archaeologists found numerous iron smelting remains. Over 2,000 years ago, there was an iron smelting centre in the state of Han here. Ironware then was already being produced on a certain scale. The sharp point of the iron sword from the state of Yan, unearthed at Yi County in Hebei Province, is as hard as present-day high-carbon steel. During those hundreds of years of the Warring States period, bronze was gradually stepping off the stage of history and iron was opening up a new era. And it was hard to understand that the Qins of the same time had not caught up with this new era. The 40,000 pieces of weapon unearthed in the pit of the Terracotta warriors were all made of bronze. Could it be said that the Qin army unifying China was poorly equipped? A case of attempted murder known to all was recorded by Sima Qian in the historical records. 1 year before the Qin Empire unified China, when the strong Qin army was ready to wipe out the Yan state, Jin Ke, an envoy of Yan, came to the Qin Empire with a map of Yan state. This was a carefully planned plot. Jin Ke's real purpose was to assassinate the first emperor of Qin under the cover of presenting the map. It was stated in the historical records that Jin Ke, the assassin, was holding a dagger, and the first emperor of Qin ran around the pillars trying to draw his sword to fight back. He tried 3 times but failed. Sima Qian explained that the sword of the first emperor of Qin was too long to be drawn out in time. Bronze swords were generally daggers. The reason why it couldn't be made long enough was because bronze was brittle and easily broken off. In the period of the Warring States, the length of the well-known Gojian sword of the Yue king was only 55.6 centimetres. Bronze swords were generally broad and short, not much more than 60 centimetres long. A sword of this length could be easily drawn. How was it possible the first emperor of Qin failed to draw out his sword because it was too long? The historians have long puzzled over Sima Qian's explanation. In 1974, archaeologists discovered an entirely different bronze sword in the pit of Terracotta warriors. What surprised the specialists was this sword was over 91 centimetres long. How could Qin craftsmen make such a long sword? It could be inferred that the first emperor's bronze sword was most likely lengthened. It was extremely difficult to draw a 1-metre-long sword while trying to escape from his assassin. According to Sima Qian's records, the first emperor of Qin finally managed to draw out his sword on hearing his imperial physician shout, "Put your sword on your back and draw it out." Specialists were puzzled. What on earth was the purpose of lengthening the sword? Richard Burden, a British scholar of ancient weapons in the 19th century, believed that in a fight with daggers, stabbing was superior to slashing as it was closer to the opponent. The ancient Roman army came to a similar conclusion in bloody battles. With the same strength, stabbing was more lethal than slashing. Stabbing caused death, but slashing caused wounds. The Qin sword was 30 centimetres longer than that of their enemies. Obviously, they could more easily stab them. That was the most likely reason why the Qin swords were lengthened. However, they were made of bronze after all. How did they manage to make long swords which did not break? In the Bronze Age, the key problem of sword casting was how much tin had to be put into the copper during the smelting process. A sword would be soft with less tin in it, and it would be hard with more tin but more brittle. A chemical quantitative analysis on Qin swords reveals that the proportion of copper to tin for a bronze sword is perfect for a combination of hardness and toughness. What is even more attractive is its shape. Professor Yuan Zhongyi has carefully studied this peculiar shape.
琴剑是个阶段性的，宽则束腰到前面尖儿，都是这样，成阶段性。后脖呢，由后脖加后脖到尖儿的，它是阶段性递减的意思。
The design enhanced the key part of the Qin sword with a certain elasticity. At the same time, the sword itself wasn't too heavy. Perhaps the lengthening of Qin swords suggested the Qin army had made a breakthrough in the theory of fighting skills.
后脖宽直的不一样，从一个阶段性的变化，它刺过以后就有一定的弹性，它就不容易折断。
The casting technique of the Qin sword had reached a peak. Its length, hardness and toughness were a near perfect combination. As a result, its attacking performance was greatly enhanced. According to Sima Qian's records, the first Qin emperor, with only a single stroke, struck the assassin Jin Ke to the ground. With him perished the state of Yen. Over 2,000 years ago, after annihilating the 6 states in the Central Plain, the Huns, a nomadic people from the north, became the main enemy of the Qin Empire. When the Qin army was at war to unify the country, the Han cavalry took the opportunity to come southward and occupied large areas of land to the south of the Yellow River. How to cope with this brave, agile Han cavalry became a main preoccupation for the first emperor of Qin. It was very difficult for the traditional infantrymen to resist when the Han cavalry charged at high speed. Judging by the historical records, a long-range weapon called the crossbow most likely played a leading role in defeating the Huns. In the pit of the Terracotta warriors, the wooden parts of the crossbows had already rotted away over time, but the remains make it possible for the Qin crossbows to be reconstructed. The restored Qin crossbow is of amazing power. A Qin crossbow was different from an ordinary bow. It had to be drawn with a stirrup. An arrow could only be fitted on the bowstring with all the bowman's strength. The specialists estimate that the range of the Qin crossbow was as far as 300 metres. The effective lethal radius was 150 metres. Its lethal force was far stronger than that of any other kind of bow. The archaeologists found some small bronze devices in the traces left by the rotted crossbows. These mini bronze parts were the triggers of the crossbows. They were ingeniously designed. But it's hard to understand why they could not have been made simpler. The production cost could have been greatly reduced using a simpler mechanism. A bowman had to make great efforts to release the hook from the tightened bowstring. This required a lot of strength. It was certain the crossbow would shake at the moment of shooting. Even in today's shooting training, accuracy can be influenced if the breath is not well adjusted at the moment of firing. The crossbow of the Qin army was operated by a set of ingenious devices. The hook was suddenly lowered at the moment of shooting. As a result, it was much easier to pull the trigger. That was just one of the advantages of the crossbow. One had to make great efforts to draw a bow. Gradually, the warrior would become exhausted. The wangshan, an aiming device on a crossbow, could make the trigger automatically readjust to its shooting position. But it had another incredible function. It can be imagined how these Qin bowmen shot at the Han cavalry on the battlefield. While aiming at a target in the distance, a bowman could calculate the angle of the crossbow by means of the aiming device. The arrow could hit the enemy along a parabolic path. Most probably, the wangshan was the most primitive aiming device ever devised for a weapon. Most of the bronze weapons unearthed in the pit of terracotta warriors were arrowheads. The archaeologists hold these bronze arrowheads were from crossbows, as no bows were found in the pit. In the period of the Warring States, there were many kinds of arrowhead. Death comes to mind when one looks at the barb and bloody trough on an arrowhead. But the arrowheads discovered in the pit were all three-edged. Why did the Qin army prefer this kind of arrowhead? A three-edged arrowhead has three sharp edges and corners. Its sharp point becomes the cutting force at the moment of hitting the target. The arrowhead can penetrate the armour right into a human body. There was a fierce barb on an arrowhead with wings, but its airfoils were easily influenced by the wind, and its arrowhead could miss the target as a result. The airfoils were abolished on the three-edged arrowheads used by the Qin army. This made shooting more precise. The specialists made a careful analysis of these arrowheads. They found it hard to believe the test data when it was laid on the table.
检验了900多个数据了，结果发现那个箭头啊，它这有个3个棱，3棱几乎等长，完全一样。最小它的误差呢，它的误差达到0.02毫米，所以这个那么个精确度了，就是这个不得了。
The examination showed that the three curved surfaces were nearly the same. It's an almost perfectly streamlined arrowhead.
实际上它呢就基本就流线型，但它的流线型不过是做成弧形了，就做成这个。其实流线型就是弧形，就是这个形状嘛。这个形状反而不好。你看我们这箭，原来我们用这样的箭头，现在不行，现在都是这样的箭头，就和那子弹头一样。
The outline of the arrowhead is quite similar to the external form of a bullet, which can reduce air resistance during flight. We have every reason to believe the Qins had the same purpose in designing three-edged arrowheads.
我们搞过那个风度实验，就看我这个箭怎么飞。说这样出去以后，它的气流上下左右的气流它是平等的，就是说左边多少右边多少它平等的，上往下它都是平等的，所以它才能保证这支箭沿着预定的轨道前进。
The results the Qins achieved were quite close to the rules of modern aerodynamics. This ancient arrowhead was a representative example of early projectiles, comparable to today's bullets. It was quite likely that the bow, together with its arrow, were the high-tech weapons of those days. It greatly strengthened the power of the Qin army in its attacks. In 214 BC, the Qin army launched an all-out war against the Han cavalry. Within a year, 300,000 Han cavalrymen were utterly destroyed. A large area of land to the south of the Yellow River returned to the Qin Empire. Bows played a vitally important role in winning this war. It can be imagined that showers of arrows could accurately hit the enemy war horses and cavalrymen before they charged the Qin's position. The accuracy of the Hun archers could in no way match the Qin's cavalry. The Hun's leather armour could not resist the strong penetrating power of the Qin arrows. Arrows were the most deadly weapons to the Han cavalrymen. As one Chinese classic on the art of war says, the crossbow was the most effective weapon against the attack of the nomadic peoples in ancient times. The design of the bronze crossbow was an amazing achievement. It was too difficult and complicated for the Huns to copy this mechanical device. New discoveries were made when the specialists carried out in-depth study of the Qin's weapons. The Pi was a long-handled weapon originating from a dagger. Its shape once varied widely. The shape and size of the Pi discovered in the pit of Terracotta warriors are completely the same, though they were produced over 10 years apart. These two dagger axes were not made in the same year, but they are exactly alike. Ezhou in Hubei province was the old site of the state of Chu. Archaeologists discovered a Qin sword there. This long, thin Qin sword was entirely different from the bronze Chu sword in those days, but its shape is exactly the same as the Qin sword in the pit of Terracotta warriors. More than 40,000 three-edged arrowheads discovered in the pit of Terracotta warriors were all made to standard specifications. The average error was only plus or minus 0.83 millimeters in the width of the bottom of the arrowhead. Metallurgists in Beijing Science and Engineering University carried out a metallurgical analysis of the arrowheads of the Qin army. They found the proportions of metal were almost the same. Thousands of arrowheads were cast based on the same formula. That is to say, all the arrowheads shot by the Qin army were of the same powerful quality, no matter whether they were used in the battlefields in the northern grasslands or in the southern forests. Could it be said that the arms workshops all over the Qin Empire purposely or even compulsorily produced those weapons according to a certain fixed technical formula? If this was true, the Qins had far outstripped their own times. Standardization is the foundation of modern industry. Standardized production makes it possible for component parts made by different suppliers to be assembled and enables mass production. 2,000 years ago, when agricultural civilization had just begun to mature, what was the Qin's purpose if they did have standardized production of weapons? As the production of the crossbow used by the Qin army was entirely standard, their spare parts had to be interchangeable. On the battlefield, the Qin army could reassemble the crossbows by using the intact spare parts of the damaged ones. And other weapons in the Qin army could be interchanged as well. As far as most of the ancient weapons were concerned, the degree of accuracy required for interchangeability was not very high. The specialists estimate the standardization of the Qins must have a more important purpose. Various kinds of weapons discovered in the Terracotta warrior pit must have performed perfectly on the battlefield. Most likely they were optimized from the experience gained over hundreds of years of war. Specialists deduce that the Qins must have regularized the technical formula for these optimized weapons. Laws on the technical formula were issued by the state and followed by all arms manufacturers. Judging by present industrial standards, the standardization of those weapons was rather rough and ready, but it's quite certain that the reason the Qins insisted on the standard formula was to ensure every soldier was using the best weapons. The weapons of the Qin army were all exquisitely made. There were 3 edges over 90 centimetres long on each flat side of the long, thin sword, which divided it into 8 separate surfaces. It was extremely difficult to produce these surfaces by hand. The processed part of the circular arc on a dagger axe was highly precise. The 3 streamlined surfaces on an arrowhead were exactly symmetrical. What perplexes the specialists is the fact that it was possible for some gifted craftsmen to turn out some pieces of this kind of weapon, but the real situation was hundreds of thousands of weapons in the pit of terracotta warriors were nearly the same quality. According to Sima Qian's records, the strength of the Qin army was more than 1 million men. Besides, this army was highly specialized and was equipped with very advanced weapons. In Europe, at nearly the same time, Alexander's army numbered around 50,000, and even in the strongest Roman army group there were only hundreds of thousands of soldiers. It was an unimaginable task to supply an army of 1 million soldiers with weapons. In the 10 years' war of unification, the arms workshops in the Qin Empire must have been the busiest places in the world. They had to work full steam ahead, night and day. The problem was not only how to ensure the formula was standard, but also to achieve mass production. Traces of polishing can still be clearly seen when one carefully examines the circular arc of this dagger axe. There are crisscross polishing traces if done by hand. They are caused by the back and forth friction of a polisher. But the strange thing is, no sign of such crisscross traces can be found. The specialists presume the processing of the surfaces of those bronze weapons must have been done by a grinding wheel. Whether or not there was a grinding wheel 2,000 years ago has yet to be proved by archaeological evidence. Even if a grinding wheel was used, it was impossible to process these arc surfaces by hand, nor could thousands of pieces of weapons be produced up to the same standard.
考古学界很多人有这样的一种认识，认为在秦汉时代已经有某种简单的机械。
Maybe mechanical facilities enabled them to mass-produce equipment with enough quality. However, researchers haven't found any evidence of that. The Qin arms workshops remain a secret. Some characters were engraved on the weapons from the pit of terracotta warriors, which were quite similar to today's Chinese characters. Specialists found most of them were personal names. The name that appeared most frequently was Xianbang Lu Bu Wei. Lu's Spring and Autumn Annals was the most important historical document of the Qin Empire. Its compiler was Lu Bu Wei. He was then Prime Minister of the Qin Empire. According to Lu's Spring and Autumn Annals, a Qin law stated that a producer had to engrave his own name on his products. These characters look like ordinary ones, but they reveal the management secrets of the military industry of the Qin Empire. Liu Bu Wei, as the Prime Minister, was the top supervisor of military production. Under him was the Gongshi. The Gongshi was the head of an arms workshop. The head supervising the production of this dagger arc was called Zhe. Under the Zhe was a Chen, who was similar to a workshop superintendent. His name was Yi. The craftsman producing this dagger arc was called Cheng. The specialists have thus come to the conclusion that the military management system was divided into 4 grades. From Xiangbang, Gongshi, Chen, down to every single craftsman. They were in charge at each level. The person in charge could be found out by the name engraved on the weapon if any quality problem occurred. We don't know the management details, but the Qin Empire law was very severe on those who neglected their duty.
说无雷功名，就上面跟上你的名字，依靠其成，看你做的质量的好坏意思。如有不当，你做的不好的话呢，以兴其罪，以究其情，还要罚你，还要追查一下你为什么做不好。
From the inscription engraved on the ice-cold bronze, we can imagine the fate of the ordinary people in those ancient times. Zhe was the head of an arms workshop for many years. He had to supervise the production of weapons every day. He was responsible to Prime Minister Liu Buwei. The head of an arms workshop had to suffer punishment if something went wrong with the quality of a weapon according to the law of the Qin Empire. He had to do his duty for his family and himself. Large numbers of craftsmen were at the bottom of a pyramid-shaped management system. The specialists could only find the names of 16 craftsmen in the inscriptions.
工人有一个叫调的，就是学的时候养个鸟字，这个是读调的意思啊。这个人呢，干了16年工人，我看到去连续的，我看连续养到是16年，当然可能还要长了，就是。
The craftsmen were generally under a system of life tenure in the arms workshops. In any case, this craftsman called Diao had to spend his life in the workshop. In his 16 years of hard work, Diao must have suffered quite a number of frustrations. It was ordinary people like Diao who produced these excellent weapons which still exist today. From the remaining traces of their work, we can still feel their rough hands and concentrated eyesight. Numerous arms workshops in the Qin Empire could produce a large amount of weapons of high quality based on a unified formula. Their 4-graded pyramid-shaped management system was the basic guarantee. When most of the world was still in a state of wilderness and ignorance, the Qins had created the most powerful arms-producing industry in those days with their unique minds and wisdom. Now we can answer the initial question. People were not able to make iron as skillfully as they processed bronze in the times of Qin. For this reason, the first large unified empire in Chinese history was still forged with bronze. 2,000 years ago, the Qins had developed the working of bronze to its utmost point. Those bronze weapons had played a tremendously powerful role in the War of Unification. Nevertheless, the question remains, how did the Qin army use their bronze weapons? More riddles about this army from long, long ago remain for archaeologists to solve.